Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our policy salon. As everybody knows, this is a series of occasional speakers that we have been running in order to facilitate more exposure for folks at the department to some of the real visionaries in the transportation sector. And I'm very pleased to say that we're delivering on that promise yet again today by having Matt Rose with us. Matt is Chairman, President, and CEO of the BNSF Corporation.
If I was in your chair in the DOT or in public policy, I think that the thing I would be asking myself is, what is the role that the freight railroad should play over the next 25 years? Are the railroads themselves making the level of investments in terms of incremental capacity and maintaining that quality infrastructure that will be sufficient? And then finally, what's the role of government you should play in this industry as well? It's clear, and if anybody of you have been out on our railroad or anywhere on the Class 1 railroad industry, or any of you ride Amtrak on the Class 1 industry, we're just going to need more and more investment. Every part of the supply chain, from ports to highways to rails, are showing strain. What can we do as both public policy makers as well as people that operate these railroads? I think there's really two approaches that I'd like to put forward today. One of them is something that's very well known to probably everybody in this room, and that's the idea of a public-private partnership. The greatest example of that is the Alameda Corridor. The discussion for the Alameda Corridor actually started taking place in the late 80s. The corridor was a collaborative effort among the states, the cities, the feds, the ports, the railroads. Everybody came together to look at this very, very critical part of our infrastructure in the country called the San Pedro ports, and what do we do to move traffic that's coming in from specifically Asia, that's wanting to go into America's supply chains. How do we get better at that? The other solution that is something that I feel very strong about is to stimulate a market investment, and for the lack of a better term, we'll call it through an investment tax credit or accelerated depreciation. Both of those have worked well in the past. I was commenting to Jeff over lunch that when the president passed the Jobs Act and the Tax Act in '03, us, BNSF, and the other railroads, we went out and did exactly what we were incented to do. We went out and bought locomotives. We went out and we added double track. We added terminals. We provided these additional investments because it was the right thing to do. One of the reasons why I really like some sort of an investment tax credit is that it forces the railroad, it forces the industry to make investments sooner, but hopefully the tax would never be enough that it would make a bad investment at any time. We're really connecting suppliers and markets with each other. A good example is the trade that we're seeing from China. That's really made possible because of the interdependence of the steamship lines, the ports, the railroads, big box warehouses, retailers like Target and Home Depot, Walmart. They're all utilizing our railroad to become a lot more invested in the Trans-Pacific trade. 9.5 million units moved by BNSF last year. Half of those were intermodal shipments. 4.5 million of the 9. It's really quite incredible. That's the equivalent of one truck or one trailer being loaded on a rail car every 7 seconds of every day of every year. The fact that most people don't get is that rail handles 40% of all the gross ton miles in this United States. Yet we only receive about 10% of the revenue. So think about that inverse relationship: 40% of the work, 10% of the revenue. The remaining of it, of course, going to our friends in the trucking industry as well as the barges and pipelines. Consider trucking. Rail is 10% to 30% less expensive than trucking, depending on what's being moved, where, and how it's being moved. A single train carries 250 to 300 trucks while consuming only about a third of the fuel. You can imagine what morning commutes would be for the country's highways if even a small portion of the trucks that are moving on today's highways could move on rail, and imagine the opposite. If we had to move 20% less on rail, what that would do to the nation's highways in terms of congestion and mitigation, as well as the impact to the overall environment. Demand for rail capacity is growing faster than GDP, And the reason why is the well-documented driver shortage that the trucking industry has faced over the last several decades. We're also seeing a fundamental shift in the way that we get our consumer goods. We've moved predominantly from a producing economy to predominantly a consuming economy, and that dynamic isn't likely to change anytime soon. Well, again, you're going to see, I think, the capacity and demand balance begin to tip to the other side, which will then constrain growth for our overall nation's economy. We literally build and maintain our own roadways, rivers, and skies. This fact makes freight rail one of the most capital-intensive industries in American industry. We're on par with electric utilities, more capital-intensive than mining, crude oil production, and 4 to 5 times more capital-intensive than the trucking industry. So given the capital-intensive nature of our business and the already high demand and tight capacity, the question again you should be asking, are we prepared for the demands for the next 25 years? Second, most importantly, though, our customers demand it. I get a chance to meet with customers all the time, and Ed Hamburger and I met as an industry with the forest products industry, and these are not small and companies. These are people like Weyerhaeuser and Georgia Pacific, International Paper. Their presidents and CEOs came to and met with the railroads last week. Their number one concern, will the railroads have enough capacity in the next decade to handle the commerce of their goods? And that is their question, and it's an interesting issue because again, what's happening is that they're losing truck capacity, and they're not able to grow their overall truck business. So again, my challenge would be to this group to revisit the public policies to ensure that we're promoting and not hindering the type of investments that needs to be covered over this next decade. Rather than bogging down the freight railroad industry, there's much that government could and should be doing to help us to meet the challenges of this new century. We need a transportation policy that looks comprehensively at the nation's needs, including rail, over the next quarter century. If you own this country and you were in charge of all the infrastructure responsibility that you had, the ports, the highways, the railroads, the airports, all these various things, and the goal that you should have was to make sure that the citizens of your country could enjoy economic growth through domestic and foreign trade, what would you do? Well, I think you would sit down from up high and you would see what's happening to the nation's infrastructure, and the first thing you would say is, how can I get more of this stuff off the highways and onto the nation's railroads? You would make selective investments in the railroad system to facilitate that movement of goods from the highways to the railroads. And you would incent the railroads to do it sooner rather than later.
I think, as many of you know, we have been conducting a series of salons because we look forward every now and then to actually having somebody come in from the real world, visit this bureaucracy, and tell us what's going on out there. Ron Widows was good enough to do that. He's the chief executive officer of APL, one of the world's largest container lines. He gave us a briefing. I visited the Office of the Maritime Administration and heard this briefing about a month ago. I thought it was so stunning a portrayal of the crisis that is looming in the international supply chain that I asked him to please come back and make the same presentation to a larger audience. That's you. He was made the acting CEO in January of 2003 and confirmed as CEO of APL by the NOL Group Board in June of 2003. You'll be very, very interested in what he has to say. I'm very grateful, Ron, for your willingness to come here and do it again. The floor is yours.
Give you some perspective on trade growth in general, some of the things going on in the industry, and then at least our perspective on what we see transpiring. Go ahead. Trade continues to grow at a pace beyond anybody's expectation. It's being driven by the shift in sourcing, globalization in general, but the shift in sourcing, the manufacturing capability that's developed in China, Asia in general, and what that's done to transportation volume. So transportation volume is growing at multiples of GDP. And that's a dynamic that has really picked up steam over the last few years. We see that continuing. Next. Trade has continued to grow with one blip in 2001, but trade growth continues at a very robust pace. We see that continuing. You'll see a slide here in a minute that speaks to the near to medium term projections. So over the last 20 years, it's grown at a 9% compounded rate of growth, even though you see some aberrations along the way. But trade is continuing to grow at a substantially greater pace than projections. January of this year, Trans-Pacific growth was about 12 or 13%. So that pace continues. There's more demand to the U.S. East Coast than West because of some of the problems. And the network just simply doesn't support the volumes other than on the seaside. And there's a lot of ships coming. You read a lot in trade publications about the ships that are coming and the order book that's quite large, and there's a massive amount of tonnage that's coming in '06 and '07. And it was perceived that would open up quite a gap between the supply-demand, and there's a lot of things that transpire as a result of that in terms of price in the marketplace. Those events are probably not going to happen as projected because of the effects of congestion. What do we see, and how does that kind of play relative to infrastructure? At least in the short term, it's unfortunately a very ugly story. We stand here today at rail velocities that are substantially less than they were at the same time last year. I'll show you some slides here in a second that debunk a little of the propaganda that you read about the solving of LA's problems and the hiring of longshore labor, and it's all taken care of. Not so, unfortunately. So the problems that we had last year that created significant delays and significant cost impacts, not just to us, but more importantly to our customers, those are going to continue with vigor this year. And in some places, we see no light at the end of that tunnel. If you look at that in a context of the larger community of businesses in the U.S., and the billions of dollars that's been taken out of the supply chain over a period of time, how they've set their distribution capabilities in place, it's unraveling. So we had to, this last year, open up our Seattle gateway. Fortunately, we had built a big terminal and we were able to do that. Some of our customers who would have loved not to move their freight through LA, they couldn't because they didn't have distribution capability in the Northwest. Pier 1 that was with us this morning, their distribution capability is in a number of places. One place it is not is in Seattle. They're now using the Seattle Gateway. They're building a new distribution center there, as have Walmart, Target, who else? A bunch. So as companies in the U.S. see this developing, they're having to change how they think about their distribution capabilities within the U.S., where they locate those. That has implications to jobs. It has implications to their cost. It's eventually going to flow through to the consumer. All that translates into a significant increase in cost that has not yet found its way to the consumer. And as a result, this is a problem that doesn't have a face that votes. So I can talk about this a long time. I'm unique for what it's worth. I'm the only American CEO of a liner shipping company in the world, which is actually a sad fact. But who are we? We are foreign-owned shipping companies. We don't vote a lot. So the face on this problem has to come from the engagement of business in general, and that was part of the process we began today with the Department of Transportation, with government, so that the awareness is increased with the people that vote who matter to get attention. Ports are congested. In some places in the world, they're just simply at the max. You couldn't put more ships in some places in the world if you wanted to. There's no berth capability. They're completely completely overloaded. The rail and the rail infrastructure, with all difference to my friends at the railroads, is almost dysfunctional. Some railroads, more than others, are having great difficulty, and unfortunately that's going to deteriorate further because their investment just simply can't keep pace with the volume. LA has to work, or the transportation flow, mostly of all these imported goods to the U.S., is going to be negatively affected. Okay. The debunking of the propaganda you read. Things improved a bit in Southern California. Ships aren't waiting at anchor, largely because the ships aren't there anymore. The number of ship calls, this shows ship calls per month. And the capacity in the Trans-Pacific trade increased 15%. In terms of the number of ship calls in Southern California based on a capacity increase in the trade. It went down, and it went down because the ships were diverted. So the ships went to Oakland, they went to Seattle, Vancouver, a couple to Mexico, some that were all-water services dropped West Coast calls and went straight through. So there's been an improvement, but it's artificial. One of the more disturbing factors when you look at productivity, one of the reasons why the really big ships have a problem working in the U.S. is that productivity is horrible. We drew this line back for 10 years. You could draw it almost as far back as you want to go. Since containerization's been in place on the West Coast, the productivity levels have effectively not changed. You wouldn't have to build another acre of terminal space on the West Coast for years if you could just simply make use of them at a level of efficiency that exists in many other places around the world. Now, if you waved a magic wand today and the longshore labor and the terminal efficiencies on the U.S. West Coast magically doubled, unfortunately, it's not going to do too much for the flow because it just slams into the problem with the railroad. Both the major railroads in the West, both the BN and the UP, have already instituted allocation rules that will limit the flow of the cargo that they take. And it may improve the optics of their performance, but it's going to cause cargo to stack up on the West Coast, and it will still not address the problems of the overall velocity through the chain. These are velocities that are actually kind. This was put together by Credit Suisse. The UP, which we have a lot of knowledge of because they're our main railroad, their velocity today is about 14 miles an hour, not 19 as shown on this chart. That's down from 23, 24 miles an hour at the same time last year. The effect that has is pretty dramatic on the flow. So both the major railroads have seen problems. It's problems with inadequate terminal facilities on the West Coast. It's trackage problems, particularly on the southern corridor, insufficient double track or multiple track sidings that are too short. They're at a point where very small things cause their network to go completely upside down. An avalanche, bridge washout, things like that, and it brings big chunks of the network to a halt. And the recovery time from that, once it backs up, is really significant. Last year we saw delays that averaged up to 6 days. Some of those were 9, 10-day delays. So in the context of the discussion this morning, Federated, a delay of a couple days, the merchandise misses the sale. They had an event here the other day. They had a big sale, a bunch of shirts coming in for President's Day. They didn't make it. So didn't make it, and now they've got to discount all that merchandise. The economic effect of even a few days is huge. What's not understood about the rail problem is it's not just the West Coast. It's not just the trackage. It's terminals at inland locations. So where there's a terminus, where there's an interchange between railroads from one railroad to the other, the connection between the UP, CSX as an example, there's delays. There's huge delays at destination, Atlanta, Memphis, most places that you can identify. And part of that comes from just the physical plants being inadequate, And it comes in the form of the fact that the trains don't show up when they're supposed to. So they bunch, the place is congested, it's delayed, there's insufficient chassis to pick up the boxes. So you've got additional knock-on delays that take place because of the terminal capabilities, not just because of the run time or trackage issues. The trucking, there's people in this room that know more about trucking in the U.S. Than I do. We see insufficient amount of trucking capability, and a lot of people have exited the industry. I guess the good news is that the rates are going to come up dramatically, and hopefully people will re-enter the industry, but that's going to take some time. So for at least for our business, for the kind of the transcontinental inland transportation requirements, it's still very heavily reliant on rail and rail performance. There's not an understanding of this problem even within our own industry at the level that it should be. One of the really, it was enlightening, it was very positive for us to learn the degree to which the Department of Transportation understands the problem. There's no issue whatsoever with your understanding of the problem or the problems. The question is how do you take that and turn it into action by Congress? We have thought about a variety of different ways of the U.S. government assisting. Many of those things in some form or other are underway as far as incentives and things to cause the private sector to engage in that infrastructure development. If there's a way to do that in a bigger way, that would be good. What exactly that takes and how it's done, hard to say. Is there a way to redirect some of the funding that's in place already? Some of the funds that are identified in the highway bill for improving intermodal infrastructure. If there's a way to do that, then maybe there's a way to accelerate getting at the problem. Bottom line, this is not an event that shall pass anytime soon. Not only is there the impact from a cost standpoint and a flow through to the citizenry in the U.S., but the transportation network in the U.S. is so fragile that a few events bring it to a standstill. And if that happens, it doesn't require a terrorist to do it. If that happens more than a few times, like the washouts that we saw in Southern California here just within the last month, the effect that has on the transportation capability in the U.S. is fairly dramatic. And it just takes so long to recover from each one of these things because the assets are fully employed. They can't get locomotives there. They can't get crews. It just takes a really long time to work through those issues. Any event that disrupts the capability in Southern California, I mean, imagine if there was an earthquake in L.A. and what happened in Kobe happened in L.A. and half the cranes fell down tomorrow. I mean, the transportation capability of the U.S. and the effect that has on the U.S. economy would be enormous. So it's a pretty fragile thing, and I don't think most people understand that. They truly, it's just something that's not important. It kind of happens today, and he dances into Walmart, and the everyday low price is there, and that whatever that thing he buys is there. So until that changes, and the gizmo's not on the shelf, where it costs significantly more, then the man on the street doesn't see this as a compelling issue, and I guess that's our job collectively to try to change that. And of course, it's all your fault, and you got to do it. So.
I'm very excited about being able to introduce Jeff Crow. He began his career in transportation 40 years ago, working, of course, on loading docks. Where else would you start your transportation career? He did that while he was in high school and while he was in college. He's done everything from managing a local terminal to starting one of the 6 transportation and logistics businesses that now form his current company, the Landstar family of companies. He's been both chairman and CEO of Landstar Systems. So please join me in welcoming Jeff Crow. What are some of the things from our side that I think we're working on strategically? This total understanding that I think we're seeing achieved of economic freedom around the world, and the movement of goods and people from any place to anywhere, to any other place in the world is going to occur. And I think the speed of that occurring is going to be more rapid than what people realize. So rather than talking about outsourcing, insourcing, and some of those things are going on, from my vantage point, you're going to continue to see a world that's kind of definitional. It's going to get smaller and smaller, and the ability to deliver things to the local pharmacy or to Walmart's pharmacy will be decided in the economic battle place that exists. And it's not our job to decide that. It's our job to build a safe, secure transportation system that can move any place from Kazakhstan to Des Moines, Iowa, or any places in between. And I purposely actually choose Kazakhstan for a whole bunch of reasons rather than others saying China, because there are other important places in the world. So we have to build a system that I believe works around that very simple idea. I think we have to move increasingly away, this is both in the private sector, from modal thoughts and stovepipe companies and stovepipe thinking to the understanding that nearly everything we do is going to be modal. Sometimes more modal than it should be. I think we have to understand that the consumer, of which we all are, is going to demand a more flexible transportation system than we can see today. People today, and you can go anywhere from buying cars to ballpoint pens, want to have exactly what they want, when they want it, and they'll tell you when they want it. No longer is it the day of, well, I'll go buy a Ford or I'll go buy a Honda. You can say whatever you want. I want this model of this Honda in this color with this specifications, and I want it tomorrow. Staying back with congestion, which I know is important to all of you. I believe as we look forward that we're going to see more EPA types issues and congestion type issues and efficiency issues that plague our system. Realistically, at least I believe, you're not going to see a significant amount of new highways being built. I think we'll improve highways. I think we have to find ways of making them significantly more efficient, such as pre-pass and other more technological breakthroughs that ITS can talk about. I think we have to find a way to find the people, and I'm not knowledgeable in this, to make our rail systems. We're not going to build new rail track in this country, but how are we going to make those rail systems significantly more efficient when you're averaging between 19 and 22 miles an hour on rail lines? And I once was giving a speech in front of a rail executive, and I said, is it possible to think, rather than building one train that exists in 150 cars, and has two cut times from point A to point B, that maybe you could go 10 times a day with 20 car? He said, no. I said, well, why not? He said, because that's not the way we do it. I think that we spend not enough time really trying to understand where technology can fit in to the free movement of goods and commerce, both in this country and around the world. Because I believe it's an efficiency game. That rules all the way from the ports, and we talk about the congestions of ports and what's going to happen in LA, and that's a very interesting discussion, which I have sat in many rooms with, and for long periods of time, so listen to liner companies, as well as, I won't go into the airline executive, who basically say we can't solve the labor problems at the ports of the United States of America on the West Coast. And we need the government to do that for us. Now, that's a pretty interesting position, which I don't agree with. I don't think it's the government's business to solve those problems at our ports. I think the ports are going to be selected because of what we're talking about, the efficient movement of goods through those ports and feeding the systems past. Bottlenecks, we're very well aware of. Again, I think the solution is more about information systems, less about looking out and saying 15 years from now we're going to build all these new roads. I think we have to, I'll say it again, invest in the infrastructure we have and make it more efficient. Still in the U.S., a very significant amount of the capacity that is runs around this country either totally empty or partially empty. About 30 to 35% of all capacity that moves around this country still is running away empty. It's still moving away from loads that are available, less because of systems issues and visibility, although we have work to do, more as it always is about culture and belief systems of people that are running things. So I think we need to do a much better job in that area. But again, strategically, it's not how do you build systems and how do you educate people that's really the mission in front of us. And population is going to grow. There's going to be more requirements in the system, but yet I don't see a lot of additional infrastructure coming online. And by the way, I don't think it should be, oh, we don't need heavier trucks, we don't need longer trucks. I don't buy into any of that, which the ATA and the Chamber don't agree with. That's their problem. What we need is to educate and put more money into educating people and building better information systems. I actually think there's more than sufficient capacity to handle everything right now. It's just, going back to bottlenecks, technology isn't exchanged well between modes or even within modes. And I think we have a lot more to gain on utilizing what we presently have. Issues of ports are very, very significant bottlenecks. I don't at all say these are facts, but from listening in enough forums and conferences, particularly on the Pacific Rim, infrastructure spending in most of the other Pacific Rim countries are significantly greater than what we're doing and moving a lot more rapidly, and our ports are going to become second world ports.